everyone, and welcome. This is episode 349 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by Ryan and Paul. We're doing this on Monday night instead of Sunday night, and the good news is the Brewers can't lose tonight to a mediocre NL West team. So that's the good news so far. Not a lot of good news in Wisconsin sports over the last week, but man, Paul, how you been?
I'm all right. Busy. My town celebrated its centennial yesterday, and to celebrate the event, they hired Sister Hazel to play a concert in. I thought we were supposed to record yesterday. It's my fault we didn't. I thought that was going to end at a reasonable hour. It was Sunday, and there were kids involved, and that didn't happen at all. So I had a soccer tournament yesterday. My daughter played in 5 games because there's 2 levels that her team has, and she is the goalkeeper for the upper level and plays in the field for the lower, and they both made the championship. So the maximum number of games for both of them.
Oh, wow.
And got done, and I thought this thing started at 4. It started at 6:30, and then I got there, and my wife she says, "I'm not sure I'm going to make it all the way through the drone show." I was like, "There's a drone show?" So like after Sister Hazel played, then there was a drone show, and drone shows are cool, although it did have part of the drone show involved God Bless the USA, the Chud national anthem, and so it's not fun. Don't involve controversial crap in your crap. I live in a somewhat conservative area, but not that conservative. not so conservative that this is a universally beloved piece of pop art. It is not. So don't do that. Anyway, this also all took place in my kids' elementary school kind of field and playground. And so even if things had ended on time, it would have taken another hour or so to find my children, who were with hundreds of other children in familiar territory in the dark, and it made that hard. So yeah, I'm good other than that.
Always. I'm hearing that you're probably tired.
No, I'm okay, actually.
No? Okay.
I'm all right.
Not bad for a Monday. Ryan, how are you?
Well, I got questions because that stage, that was in the backyard of your kids' elementary school?
So the behind that stage is the middle school, which is in the same general complex as the elementary school, which is just to the right of that picture, I guess.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay, that makes much more sense because I'm like, that was a lot of space. That was a big stage. I can't imagine that they tore that down last night, so that had to still be up when the kids were out for recess today. So yeah,
it probably was. I did not get over there today, so I did not see it.
Yeah, I was asking Amy what the Sister Hazel song was, and so she started playing it for me, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that very, very well now. So yeah. Did they they have more than one, or is it just like really pretty much just that one?
No, they actually had a couple that were familiar to me. They had at least one of their minor hits called, I think, Happy. They had a couple of songs on soundtracks. They had one on 10 Things I Hate About You, and they had one on some garbage movie that I'm blanking on right now. So they had a couple. Their lead singer cannot sing anymore. That is the big problem with Sister Hazel. He has almost entirely lost his voice. So he had hired people to fill in the vocal tracks while he still sings. But even when he talks, you can kind of hear like, ooh, that's not good. Something went wrong there.
Yeah, that's not great. But I'm glad that they're still out on the road and making a living.
Yep.
Just having fun playing in elementary school parking lots. All right. Plenty to talk about, I guess, this week, although not all of it good with the Brewers, but we have some Patreon questions to get to, along with some other topics. But first, a reminder, as always, you can become a patron, help support us at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible. And speaking of questions, I'm sure there's going to be plenty about the Malik Willis era starting for the Packers. That doesn't sound great unless they find whatever they shot Aaron Rodgers up for his knee a few years ago in time.
Yeah, they were cagey today in saying if he misses time, it'll be Willis. Like, guys,
Come on,
it sounds like
we
he's going
know.
to miss time. Like that's a stupid game to play. Nobody has to prep for Malik Willis. The way that you prep for Malik Willis is you just blitz him mercilessly because he cannot get out. He gets himself sacked more than anybody else. That is his one thing. So I've changed my quarterback scouting quite a bit over the last couple of years. When digging into numbers, I used to hate guys who were not accurate in college. I no longer hate guys who are inaccurate in college. I hate guys who have a pressure to sack ratio over 25%, because those guys are too slow. They don't see the game with the proper speed. They don't get through their progressions quickly. They're always bad. Like Anthony Richardson, the Colts quarterback right now, he was terribly inaccurate in college, but he made the right reads very quickly, just couldn't throw it. And you can actually kind of teach an improvement in accuracy if you're making the right reads. He still is not a perfect NFL quarterback, but it looks like you can work with him, kind of how they worked with Josh Allen. Malik Willis got sacked on 30% of his college dropbacks. In all of his NFL games, he got sacked on 33% of his pressures, not dropbacks, pressures. And so, like, he just holds the ball too long. He's only 6 feet tall. He doesn't throw over the middle, which you need to do in this offense. Like, just a total disaster of I don't know. This is dumb. They need better quarterbacks. Yes. So more of this tomorrow. Feel free to ask questions about it. That's a preview of it. There's other bad things about him we'll talk about then too.
Wow. Oof. Man, I'm still just rooting for like running Josh Jacobs in the Wildcat. That's probably going to be more successful than Malik Willis trying to throw the ball.
I mean, Malik Willis averages, when he starts games, averages like 10 attempts per game. So that is essentially what the offense will be.
Yeah, Jaden Reed jet sweeps, all of that. Yeah, so make sure you get your questions in for that. A reminder, $5 level at patreon.com/MKE tailgate gets you that question priority. Plus, Paul is reporting as eligible mini pods, which, if you want to hear more about Anthony Richardson and Malik Willis and all of that, that'll be a good one on Friday as well. You also get the Minor League Extra with Ryan and Spencer. Even if you're not a patron, you can support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to this right now. Give us a 5-star review. And while you're there, please be sure to hit that follow button. All right. As we kind of alluded to, it's been an uneven, if you're being charitable, start for the Brewers in the final month of the year. They're going 2-5 to start September, including 3 losses in extra innings. The offense seems to have hit a lull after that 5-game winning streak that closed out August. Earlier in the week, the thing was they couldn't come through with a hit in scoring position. And then against the Rockies, they just couldn't get a hit at all. And did 23 straight outs on Sunday to end that game against a slew of no-name junk ballers from Colorado. So that was not a great week to witness. I guess, Paul, lucky you've been busy so much that you may not have caught all those games. But, I guess what's more frustrating for you, just when you get guys on and you can't get that hit to get them in, or they just don't hit at all? I guess which version of the past Brewers offenses have you hated the most?
We should call it Murph Timber because it isn't. First of all, it sounds nice. It also just kind of jives with Murphy's Law pretty nice as well, and so I'm down with that. So the answer is neither of those things. What the bad part is when you have a chunk of your lineup that is adept at getting on base, and then you get to that part, and you all know the part. The part mostly involves Sal Frelick hitting the ball as hard as his tiny little hands can handle, and it going almost to the warning track, but not quite. And the chunk of the lineup that includes Sal Frelick is just the death of there's men on base. Oh, he will probably hit it to the shortstop or ground into a double play, or maybe he'll be fast enough that he beats out the throw, but he's not going to strike out. So something like that's going to happen. They've just had a lot of their bad offensive players turn into pumpkins a little bit lately. Like Jake Bauers isn't a great player. A lot of these guys are on the team for defense, and they're not going to hit all the time. And so we have the good part. We got William and Willie and Jackson, but you get on base, and then you need people actually behind them to drive them in, and sometimes that's going to fail. And that's the frustrating part. That is bad. I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that they had this last week was in the 2 games that they won, because they won that first game against the Cardinals They scored 9 runs in that game on 3 home runs. All of them on those 3 home runs because Trio had the grand slam, and then there was a Willie 3-run shot in there because, of course, there was. And then Hoskins hit a 2-run homer. And then on Saturday, when the Brewers also won, I want to say they scored 5 runs in that game, and that was on 3 home runs as well. So basically, their offense, when they've got it right now, is guys hitting the ball out of the park. And that works when you're hitting the home runs, but it's been kind of few and far between at that point for that to happen, which always causes a lot of consternation. I don't know. I would much rather have the team getting runners on base and go through that frustration, because at least you're giving yourself chances. When you just are retired 23 straight times on Sunday, that was one of the most just awful games to watch, period, because Kyle Freeland sucks, and they were just getting shut down by him. So that was just terrible all around. So you're very lucky you had youth soccer to watch for that, Paul, because that was truly brutal on a level you don't see that often. So yeah, I would say I'd rather watch the team get hits or not get hits with runners in scoring position, opposed to just not doing anything at all.
Sunday was like the epitome of the have to go out west, let's just get the hell out of here kind of game, where they just everything was flat. Nothing was enjoyable about that experience. Everybody was just bad. Everything's bad. But I guess as bad as last week was, it could have been worse. It's not a huge deal because they're leading the NL Central as we record this. With the Cubs playing in LA is still at 9 games. But, I think we saw the Dodgers and the Phillies keep on winning. So the dreams of that first round bye may be slipping a little bit. But I guess, Ryan, is there any worry that they're kind of hitting this cold stretch at the wrong time again and maybe kind of sputtering to the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat, though. Those things are notoriously fickle, and they could just change on a dime. So you just don't know what's going on. What you want to see is guys be healthy going into the playoffs. That's like the biggest thing. They had a problem in 2021 where they had a bunch of guys get hurt. Adames got hurt. Urias, I think, got hurt. There were a few other players who just got hurt like late in that season, and most of them came back. But when they came back, they hadn't started to hit yet. And then the Braves came in and waltzed them out of the playoffs in 4 games, and that was that. And so, like, you want to see guys like be healthy and be productive, but whether or not they're going to turn it on at any given moment, you can't really know that. But as far as the bye situation, we were talking last week on here where I was saying, right now Fangraph says they have about a 30% chance. And I felt it was maybe even a little bit higher, maybe like 40%. They're down to 7.1% to clinch the bye now on Fangraphs. And I would say that pretty accurately represents where they're at, because they're essentially going to have to sweep the Phillies. Like, I don't see another way around that. They're going to have to sweep the Phillies. And then also play good besides that. And they're not right now. So the good part and bad part of this is there is still time to turn this around. But it also, there's like more and more time if they don't start looking better for just the angst. Jaymes and I were talking about this right before you jumped in, Paul. Like the angst to grow on this. There's still plenty of time for angst to grow, even if they're not going to, fall out of the playoffs. There's still time for it going into the playoffs cold.
Oh yeah, it would be a shame if a player got hurt and screwed up the entire important part of a season for us. I feel like that's happened a lot lately across the sports. Yeah. Like it happened with Giannis. It happened with Yelich's stupid knee. It happened on Friday. So yeah, it's not great.
We're just used to it. Also, if you haven't peeked at the wild card standings, you know who the Brewers would play in the first round.
Oh God, don't even.
Yeah, no, I have not. Who?
The Mets and David Stearns.
Oh God.
Enjoy that storyline. All right.
Well, it's better than the Cubs. I actually thought you were going to say it was the Cubs.
Yeah,
no,
it is.
No, the Cubs are still like 5 back of the third wild card. They're pretty much dead still. All right. I guess speaking of New York and national attention, there was a piece by Tom Verducci in Sports Illustrated entitled "Small Ball Brewers Are Thriving by Dominating on Baseball's Margins." So, obviously writers typically don't write their headlines, especially ones like Verducci, but he doesn't spend that much time talking about small ball, although we do spend a lot of time complaining about bunts around here. He was mostly writing, a feel good piece about Pat Murphy and his attention to detail oriented approach to managing and teaching the young players fundamentals. There's some fun stories in there about, young players missing signs. And then he's, telling Freddie Freeman to tell Garrett Mitchell to run because he hasn't yet, that kind of stuff. But I guess the key quote we want to kind of talk about here, because it sort of leads into our next Patreon questions, was quote, watch the Brewers play baseball and some things become obvious. They want to run you off the field. They catch everything in sight. They throw a ton of fastballs and they compete like walk-on freshmen trying to prove themselves to a head coach whose old school attention to detail is the dominant force of the program. So along those lines, let's jump down to Tim Brown on Patreon, who's asking, are the Brewers trying to do this the same way the 2015 Royals did? Do you see that as a good comparison for this team? So I guess, Paul, did they feel Yosty to you?
A little bit lately, at least. I do feel like the bunting really picked up late, and I'm not sure about that, but the stealing is just a good idea. Like, everybody's super fast. This isn't like some old school bit of stealing. This is just playing to the strengths of your team, so that's fine. I am sick of the bunting, though. There may be some selection bias here because I have never once seen it work personally. I'm sure it has. I just have yet to witness it. So I don't like it, and I don't like bunting. Generally speaking, sacrifice bunting. I did see, I think it was Jake Bauers' bunt for a hit the other day.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually still kind of stupid because I think it was on a 3-1 pitch, but it worked, so fine. But the sack bunting is really driving me nuts.
Yeah, so just to get into detail on that, at this point, the Brewers have 11 sack bunts for the season. So according to Baseball Reference, they have 11 sack hits, and the league leaders have 31. So the Arizona Diamondbacks have 31. League average is, 13. And the Brewers are like 16th, 17th. I don't want to count all those spaces down, but they're below average in terms of actually bunting. I think that part of it that's doing is definitely they bunt for hits so much that I think we feel like they're sacrificing more than they necessarily are. But they're also doing it in some just weird situations. There was a game this last week. I don't know if you caught this, but the game against the Cardinals in the 10th inning where they had runners on first and second, nobody out, and they were facing Matt Liberatore, who's a power lefty pitcher, and you had Joey Ortiz at the plate with a chance to win the game because they had shut down the Cardinals in the top of the 10th. Because this was at home. They had a chance to win the game there, and they took the bat out of Joey Ortiz's hands in that situation and brought Bryce Terang up instead to face a power
against a lefty.
Lefty. And it was like, I don't even have necessarily a problem. This was the last of these sacrifice bunts. I don't even necessarily have like a huge problem with the idea that you're gonna the 2 outs, nobody on, the 2 on, nobody out, first and second, nobody out. Situation is the
batting with the platoon advantage
is the best situation to bunt in a vacuum. But this was not because, Paul is 100% right here. You don't have the platoon advantage. You're giving up the platoon advantage to take the platoon disadvantage and end up with that extra out. And, of course, we know what happened. It didn't work. But it just seemed like a really sort of weirdly desperate thing to do at that point, considering how hot at that point they were a hot team. They were coming off of, I think it was 5 straight wins at that point. So they were a hot team coming in at that point. Why are you doing that? It didn't make sense, and I don't get some of that, and I don't know how much I want to fixate on it and get paranoid and worry about it. But that one was just I don't understand why you would do that in that situation.
No, it's just dumb. You shouldn't do that. That was a stupid thing to do.
I kind of wonder how many bunts have occurred post Yelich injury as opposed to pre. I don't know if there's an easy way to pull that apart, but even then, like Ryan, you said, it's not a significant amount of successful sack bunts to begin with. It's not like they're way above average, but no, it is sort of like your cognitive bias, right? Where you're only remembering the failures because you get mad, and the ones that worked were like, oh, whatever, you forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the teams that are bunting a lot ahead of them, the Diamondbacks are real hot. The Padres are second on that list. I mean, there's also a bunch of bad teams up here. The White Sox are up here. The Cardinals and Reds are up here. The Nats are up here. So those teams.
Why are the White Sox ever bunting? You're down by 8 runs. Don't bunt.
I don't.
Come on.
Like, that whole situation is just so far beyond the pale. There's no point even trying to figure out what's going on there. It's just it's a sad and pathetic situation. But yeah, this one, to the actual question though that he was asking. So with the Royals situation, there are some comparables. The running part, the fact that these teams are really built around deep bullpens, that matches up perfectly. Like, that's very much true. Built to try to pray you can get 4 innings out of your starter and then go to your deep bullpen. That's going to be the plan here, and that's how the Royals won that World Series for the most part. They really didn't have much starting pitching in that series, so that's comparable. But and I guess in some of the ways, like the way the teams were built is somewhat comparable in that there's a lot of homegrown coming into both of them, but there was also the Royals were extremely aggressive in the trade market and on the free agent market and just like spending in general going in, and the Brewers have not put anything like the number of chips on this season because the Royals basically made an all or nothing bet for 2014-15 and I guess kind of 16 that they could get over the hump, and they did, and it worked, but they kind of made this all or nothing bet, and then the result has been like a decade in the wilderness after that. So the Brewers definitely aren't doing that, right? Like they're not trying to set that up. So for as many ways as the Brewers do kind of compare the running, just sort of some of the like attention to detail stuff that Murphy brings, there's, as much as there are those things, there's also just, a lot of ways that it's not comparable.
Yeah. 6 of the 11 sacrifice bunts came in June or earlier, 5 in July or later. So pretty evenly spread, actually.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think, because I've been checking this sort of periodically throughout the year, and they've always kind of been below the average every time I've looked. So I was always kind of like, at the beginning, I thought, oh no, they must be up towards the top of this thing. And they weren't. And I think it really is. It's got to be the all the bunting for hits, right? That's just kind of skewing the perception and making us think they sacrifice more than they do. Yeah.
They are, in fact, 8-3 in games that include a sacrifice bunt.
Well, there you go. That's winning baseball, Paul.
Feels like those 3 have come recently, though, doesn't it?
They are May 20th, May 26th, and then September 3rd.
Okay. So not that.
So like one in the last week. Yeah.
Okay.
The other was apparently a really bad week heading into Memorial Day. All right. I guess speaking of other things that we all hate that we think never work, from bunting to the contact play, Price Trozen asking, so I guess the contact play is here to stay. If you were Murphy, would you stick with it or try something else? I think I've only seen it work twice all season. I may be wrong, but that's the perception I have. So another thing where you only really remember the really bad, egregious outs at home. You don't really remember the times that it worked, Paul. But
it worked one time, and I tweeted about it, and it'll never work again. Now it's 1 for 1,000. So that's that. It's not as bad as people think it is. It requires a bang bang play, and if it is in play, it gives you a small advantage. There is a way to do this between running blindly and being super conservative. Like, you are allowed to just read the ball off the bat and make a split decision, or just quickly listen to the third base coach, and you're still going to make it most of the time and maybe get dead a little bit less. So I just wish they would play like kind of the safety squeeze version of it a little bit more than they do. But yeah, it's dumb. It never works. I'm trying to find when it did work, because I definitely noted it on Twitter, but I'll track it down.
Yeah, you'd have a few fewer successes with it, but you'd also have fewer outs. So I don't know how that would work out in the balance. There's also the problem with, like, when you talk about the contact play, whether it works or not. One of the things that usually gets lost about that is no one ever remembers the times when somebody hits a home run or hits a double or has one sneak through the infield and the contact play was on. No one ever remembers that, because it wasn't that doesn't,
you don't notice. Yeah.
It doesn't enter in the equation, but that's definitely part of why managers do it, is like, well, if that happens, then running on that play was fine anyway, and you would have scored anyway. But from that perspective, it's like that it's baked into the sort of percentages there, but nobody ever remembers those. They remember somewhat the times that it worked, but I think even then, I think that sometimes gets lost. But definitely remember the times it doesn't work. That is
So,
what sticks out.
in defense of, I guess, everyone, myself included, I have spent all season waiting to tweet when the contact play worked and tweeting when it didn't. And so I have a good record of this. It worked one time on August 14th. The contact play succeeded. I don't remember who was in it, but everybody pointed it out to me, and it did, in fact, happen. So what I typically tweet when the contact play doesn't work is, someday the contact play will work, but is being the first team to ever score a run on the contact play really worth all these outs? So,
Yeah, I wonder, is there a place that tracks this? Somebody has to.
I was
track
trying
this,
to
right?
think of this because shout out to the Brewer Fanatic podcast on Friday. Jack and Spencer talked about this because it was a huge issue in the Cardinals series. But yeah, I can't think of a good way to track this, because it's not necessarily noted in game logs. You would almost have to go through like all 22 style, right? And
Mhm.
like map out every play like you're at PFF or something for
Right.
that to be accurate. I'm sure maybe teams have their own analytics that say, yeah, on average it'll work more often than not, whatever. But dang it, until then, we're gonna stick with our own personal memory biases and go from there. So yeah,
Yep.
it is annoying just seeing it happen, but it does work.
on May 26th,
Yeah.
sorry, that's May 26th, 2014, not 2024. I've been doing this a long time.
It's worked twice in a decade. Yeah.
That was the contact play can die in a fire. So,
Oh man, remember when we said that all the time back in 2014?
Yep.
Yeah. So the thing about it too that I'm wondering now is when it, like, there's also situations where it makes sense. If a guy gets thrown out at home on a contact play where there were 2 outs, does that really count as a failure of the contact play, or is that just a guy making an out? Or situations like where if you have the runner on, you have runners on second and third and say no outs, and you put on the contact play and you end up with a runner on third and 1 out, is that significantly different than like if you hadn't put the contact play on in that case? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you end up
That
with runners on the
did come
corners
up, yeah.
instead of runners at second and third, but both with 1 outs, the difference in outcome isn't that different, because that's happened a few times this year where it's like, well, that didn't really matter to the outcome of the play because we're basically in the same game state that we started with. They just took the chance and it didn't work, but whatever, it didn't really materially affect the outcome of the thing. So there's that too. It's such a hard one to keep track of, isn't it?
Oh God, I just uncovered something.
Uh-oh.
Oh boy.
You know how they're 8-11 or 8-3 when they have a sacrifice bunt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two of the losses are Joey Ortiz. His only 2 sacrifice bunts. They
Are
lost the
losses.
game.
Oh
Never
wow.
bunt with Joey Ortiz.
Yeah, this is like somebody needs to get Murph's attention on this, because that we can't have.
Well, I'm guessing he already has this in his. It's a dumb stat to manage by, so I'm assuming somebody already told it to him.
Oh man, I guess speaking of things that Pat Murphy is aware of, Ian Pomplin is asking, Sal Frelick seems to be losing power, and he never had all that much to begin with. Can he get his power up, or is this just who he is? I say that because in that Tom Verducci article, Murph is quoted as saying, like, Frelick can only hit the ball like 80 miles an hour. It's the hardest he can hit. So, I mean, the manager is aware that he cannot hit the ball very hard, but he still likes him anyway. I mean, Paul, at this point, this is kind of maybe who he is. He's got roughly a full year's worth of plate appearances by now, right?
Yes.
He's got to
should,
have. He missed a
and-
bunch of time last year, but at this point, like I feel like we've seen enough.
We have seen enough. I feel like I am required to mention in advance that he is, in fact, because Ryan will mention it, he's not actually atrocious offensively. He has an 87 OPS plus currently, but there's a really hard ceiling on players who can't hit the ball above the 1% hard hits rate of MLB players. And the problem with Frelick is a lot of guys could trade some contact for power, but I think what's Frelick going to get to if he does that? Like 10th% exit velocity and give up strikeouts as a result? I don't know if that works either. It's a problem. It's he really is just a really, really good defensive fourth outfielder, slappy guy, and that's all he's ever going to be.
Well, okay, so that is definitely what he is right now, and he's just miscast as having to play as much as he is because they have, if Christian Yelich weren't hurt, he wouldn't be playing this much. Like, I can pretty much guarantee that would not be happening. So at this point, he definitely is, and there is all kinds of questions. I don't know if you caught, we talked about this a little bit, because Spencer and Jack talked about this in depth, this idea of Frelick was making harder contact in AAA, but is that ever going to translate to the big leagues, or is he just a guy who that extra little bit of velocity, that extra little bit of goodness that that big league pitchers bring to the game, is that just something he is going to be unable to adjust to and to make work in his game? And I think that's an open question. I mean, I thought Bryce Terang was basically, not capable of being at nearly as good as he's been this year, even with the slowdown that he's had. And he has been. So I don't know. Frelick is a guy who, even like Paul's right, even as he's as bad as he's been this year. And I do want you to go Matub here in just a second. I'll give you a second to pull up your tweet about this because I laughed hysterically at the Simpsons one. Paul, when you did the
Another one.
Yeah. Okay.
One.
Yeah. That one. Yes. Because I'm looking at his StatCast page right now, and expected slug, second percentile, average exit velocity, first percentile, barrel percentage, first percentile, hard hit, first percentile, launch angle, speed spot. That's where it really gets nice. 13th percentile, bat speed, third percentile. But then you look at all this other stuff, and he's squaring up in the 91st percentile. He's chasing in the 70th, whiffing in the 98th, Kang in the 86th.
People who wonder why his barrels and squared up percentage do not match, it is because barrels have a minimum exit velocity requirement, I believe, of 89 miles per hour, something along those lines. And so even though he squares up the ball, he doesn't hit it 89 miles per hour, except in 1% of the times he squares it up.
Yeah. I think if he wants to become a good big league hitter, he's going to have to get stronger. I think that's basically what this is. He's just not making strong, hard enough contact. He's going to have to get stronger. And I don't know if that's going to decrease the rest of his value, because he has actually been a fairly valuable player this year just because the defense is so good. And the 330 on base percentage in this era is well above average, or solidly above average anyway. And it actually does kind of make it play and make it, the rest of it, barely sort of acceptable, even though it's, obviously below average. But he's going to need to just get stronger, right? Like that is the answer here. He has to get stronger, or he's just not going to be a good big league hitter ever, I don't think.
Hit the weights. Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Call Matub.
I guess. Yeah. Matub knows about that too. All right. I guess in addition to Salfrey, like he's not the only one struggling. As we mentioned, the offense has kind of been in a rut for the last week or so. Jay Google is asking, do you guys think the young kids are starting to hit a wall? Need to get guys off days? Question mark. So, Ryan, what do you think? Obviously, like Sal's struggling, but he's been struggling all year. You know, I'm trying to pull up like numbers in the last month or so and see who's kind of scuffling. Joey Ortiz is like 87 WRC plus in the last month. Bryce Harang 83, but that's not really different than what he was doing. I guess what are you seeing? Do we need to try to get some
Is he really
off days
83
for the
in the
young
last month?
kids?
Because I was looking and he was higher than that. Since like August 16th, it was.
I'm going back to August 8th.
Oh, okay, he
being
must have been
selective with endpoints, but yeah.
I was not around for those games, so I don't really remember where it was. But yeah, maybe to an extent that's what's going on here with certain guys. It certainly could be that they're getting tired, but I also just think that this is part of the natural ups and downs of a season. And they have been doing a better job of. William Contreras has been he got an actual day off the other day without DHing, and it was with another day with a regular off day in there, so they could get him 2 in a row. And he's been DHing a decent amount with both Eric Haas and Gary Sanchez getting some work behind the plate. So that's been good to see, and that's been helpful for sure. But I don't know if that's necessarily the issue, or it's just they're just in one of those time periods right now where things aren't clicking for them. And I'm not sure that necessarily giving guys days off, because we have a fair number of off days. The Brewers are obviously, they're off today. We're not playing today. They were off last Thursday, right? They had that day off. So they're starting to, September seemed to have plenty of off days built into it. So I don't think they're like not getting the days off that they need. It's more just a question of they need to get hot, and like basically somebody other than, I guess, Jackson Churio and William Contreras has been hot again lately too. So those guys have sort of been carrying a good chunk of and obviously Willie Adames. Those three have really been carrying the offense. But outside of that, there haven't been too many players who've been super hot.
The problem here is that their lesser players aren't hitting, and that is a problem with lesser players. Sometimes they don't hit. Like Rhys Hoskins isn't a young player. He is a grizzled veteran. And
oh my God. He's an anchor right now.
Over his last 14 days, he has a 447 OPS. He is hitting 116, 192, 256. And you might be thinking, well, that's 14 days. Over his last 28 days, he's hitting 127, 214, 241. So that's a 454. He's terrible. That's a problem. That's probably the single biggest problem, honestly. Jackson Churio, on the other hand, again, is 20 years old. And over the last 2 weeks, he's hitting 277, 393, 660. So, I don't think it's a youth thing exactly. It really is. I just think the bad players are playing bad, and some of them need to get hot. Usually your bad players, bad-ish players, not as good players, are the ones who cycle through, like 2 weeks being really good, 2 weeks being really bad. You don't just play mediocre the whole time. That's not how it works. And right now, a lot of them are playing bad at the same time. That's really the long and short of it. Blake Perkins has been bad offensively lately. Garrett Mitchell has been atrocious offensively lately. It's just that. Two or three of them need to start playing averagey for a little bit.
Yeah, it is, because those top three guys that we were talking about have been pretty good. It's just you've got a lot of outs in the lineup other than that. And like there's also some guys in here that, especially you look at Rhys Hoskins and Gary Sanchez, guys like that, who the power is there and they're perfectly capable of hitting home runs. Rhys Hoskins has 23 of them this year. You just hope that they start showing up in the right spots and that you start getting some of those big dingers in big situations. He's had a few of them, but they've been few and far between, and he just doesn't do much else at other times. And I'm not breaking any news here when I say I'm pretty sure we're going to be with Rhys Hoskins another year here, because I don't see how he would opt out after the season he's had. But maybe he gets really hot down there.
He's not opting out of anything.
He would.
He's going to sign that that extension, whatever it is. He's gonna sign that option in blood. Like it's gonna be the first thing he does.
Yeah. So
whenever
we'll
they
see.
lose, locker cleanout day, he'll be like, "Well, see you guys in Arizona in February. Just sign it there." Yeah.
Yeah. But there are guys who potentially could get hot. It's just, will they?
It's just the wish and the prayer stuff that I think a lot of people are sick of, All right, let's talk about happier things. Pitching. The Brewers are still really good at that. And the start of September has kind of seen a revival of a couple of guys that some of us, I think at least I, started to write off in DL Hall and Aaron Ashby. And Michael Parr is asking, how much does the emergence of Hall and Ashby change the equation of the playoff pitching? Both being lefty multi-inning guys would make them good piggyback candidates, wouldn't it? And I had this same exact thought the other day when DL Hall came out after Colin Ray, and just mowed him down for literally the second half of the game. And I was like, well, damn, that could play in October. You get 3 or 4 innings of Colin Ray, and then DL Hall fireballing lefty after a soft tossing righty, right, Paul? I think that's a good way to keep hitters off balance.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I'm not sure how much it changes the equation, only because this is just the Brewers' MO. That, oh yeah, a guy came back and now he's one of the best relievers in baseball. Well, yes, they do that. So that equation is just the equation. But yeah, Ashby looked amazing. He looks like incredible immediately. And you can't not be impressed by DL Hall since he's come back. He has looked phenomenal as well, and he has done it in a couple of different ways. Most impressively, just being out there for multiple innings. So their biggest club when they get into the playoffs is that they can grind you into dust with relief pitchers, and to be able to do that with absolute maximum efficacy, you need a couple guys who can go 3-ish, 4-ish once in a while. Both of them can do that. So that is very, very good. That gives them weapons other teams don't have. And as down as we are on them right now, if they can get like a 2-run lead in a playoff game and lean on one of those two for the middle innings, that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, as troublesome as the offense has been lately, aside from those games when they were smacking home runs, the pitching has been really, really good. And a big part of this is the fact that you have not only those two, but you also have Joe Ross coming in and doing largely the same thing. Not with quite the efficacy that those two do, but also I think earning himself a spot on a playoff roster, if for nothing more than just like eating innings. He would be a guy that you would have in there to chew up innings in games that are not competitive. So I think that, yeah, this is absolutely remarkable what's going on with those guys. And it does give them options. And it really does bring to mind when we were thinking about 2018, how they didn't have much of a starting rotation, but they did have like Corbin Burns available to come in and pitch 2 to 3 innings out of the bullpen. Brandon Woodruff was starting in that postseason, but they also used him a little bit out of the bullpen, or at least, for trick purposes. But it really, this is more of like kind of what they had in 2018. And then you get to the back end guys after that. They really kind of are setting up themselves with a 2018-esque playoff pitching roster here. It's really going to be interesting to see which direction they decide to go with it, because right now, I don't know if there's room for, and we should probably mention this because it's all anybody is talking about right now with this team, is like Jacob Mizrowski had another 3 up, 3 down, perfect inning, 3 strikeouts on, I guess it would have been Sunday. It would have been yesterday. And the question just becomes, is there room for him to be in there? Can you make that work? Because there have also been, he's also had 2 outings over the last, since he got to AAA and started doing this, where he walked 3 guys. And you can't really have that in that role, right? Like that's what you can't have happen, is somebody coming in and walking a bunch of people, because that's a good way to get beat in those situations. So he's going to, I kind of am starting to understand why he's not on the big league roster yet, why they haven't pulled that and done that yet, because there's still this question of command, and he's had a lot of command issues throughout his minor league career. So will they be able to do that? But they, even without him and Yoho and the new shiny toys, there's so many guys who could potentially be part of a very good shutdown bullpen in the postseason that they sort of have an embarrassment of riches. It's going to be hard to figure out what they want to do with those guys anyway, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I was here sitting like, oh, yeah, of course they're going to have Miz and Yoho up in September. We'll expect it soon. And now we're getting to be a couple of weeks in. And like you said, there's just not that space on the roster. I don't even know who you ship out at this point to make room for that. I guess on the topic of Jacob Mizorowski, let's jump down to Kevin Kundinger's question. He's asking, I've seen a handful of articles this week calling for Mizorowski to be brought up. However, I thought that he would be ineligible for the postseason roster, given that he's not on the 40-man roster. Is that true? Ryan Top, why is that not true?
So there's a loophole in this rule. It is technically true that a player who's on the 40-man roster or 60-day injured list as of August 31st is eligible for the postseason. But a player who doesn't meet that criteria can still be added to a team's postseason roster via petition to the commissioner's office if the player was in the organization on August 31st, which obviously both Mizorowski and Yoho were, and is replacing somebody who is on the injured list, and as long as they've served the minimum amount of time required for activation. Okay, so basically there's a way to get around this. I believe right now, if you wanted to, they could use Bryce Wilson for this purpose. I believe he would.
I was like, ooh, tough time for Bryce Wilson's shoulder to get a little scratchy. Yeah.
And there's obviously other guys here as well. Hobie Milner just came off the IL, and it's not been great for Hobie.
No.
So
it has not.
He could go. I don't know that they. Hobie's a tough one because he's been so integral to the bullpen for a few years here now, but I don't know. The smoke and mirrors thing never really was very convincing, and now that he's giving up dingers like he did on Sunday, I don't know. Yeah. That's a tough one, right? Especially a lefty on lefty homer. That was really sort of disturbing to see.
You have one job.
That's no good. Yep.
Yeah. And like Peguero is his own kettle of fish, and there's all of trying to figure out what's going on with that. But like you look at Peguero versus Mizorowski, I think both of those guys could get you in trouble because of the walks. Like both of those guys have a penchant for putting people on. It's just that we've seen Peguero do it when Mizorowski's been doing it in AAA. We haven't actually watched it. So, yeah.
I guess with all that in mind, Adam Post asking, as a whole, is the Brewers pitching staff better than last season? Paul, what do you think?
That's a good question because you think you have Burns and Woodruff, and immediately they're obviously the best. And they do offer, I think, something different than what we have here as starters that miss bats and can save your bullpen in their own right. But this is probably a better pitching staff overall because going off of memory a little bit versus last year, but the bullpen, I think, is quite a bit deeper and not just deeper in like innings eating, but in its excellence. There's just a lot of guys who can get you out and a lot of guys that you can go through before you get to the worst guy in the bullpen. And that's, I think, pretty good. Like, is Colin Ray better than Corbin Burns? No, but he's 12-4 and he gets you a lead, and then a bunch of just incredible guys come in after him and make sure nothing ever gets lost. So, this is probably better.
Yeah, it's really, really close. So last year, the Brewers led baseball with a 3.99 runs allowed per game. That was just ahead of the Padres at 4.00. Mariners were 4.07. Mariners and Twins were both at 4.07. So they led baseball in terms of runs allowed per game. But I think a big part of that was, I think the defense was better last year than it is this year. Doesn't that seems fair, right?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, in two specific spots, I think it was better at catcher. Last year they had really, really good catching. And
it was
this
better
year
at catcher last year. That's definitely true.
And Willie has struggled this year defensively. So better at catcher and shortstop last year than this year. I don't know how the rest of it necessarily shakes out. I know the Brewers were up towards the very top
Third's
last
better.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, third's definitely better. Yeah, they were up towards the top last year in terms of defense, and I think they're more middle of the pack, still above average, but more middle of the pack this year. And if you look at this year, and this is I keep going back to, and this flabbergasts me. The Brewers are third in runs allowed per game this year. They have a 3.90 runs allowed per game, and that's behind only the Mariners at 3.76 and the Braves at 3.82. Having lost Burns, having lost Woodruff, having lost Devin Williams for most of the season, they managed to basically be good.
Yeah, I think they're better defensively this year. I think it's close, but one thing Yelich is worse than whoever replaces Yelich. There was actually quite a lot of Joey Wiemer in center last year, and while he's good, Blake Perkins is quite a bit better. And there was a lot of rowdy trash at first base last year, and there has a lot of Reese trash this year, but
Right.
But Bowers is actually good, so I think they actually get, and Tyrone Taylor a lot in right field, and Sal Frelick is bad at hitting, but he's a better defender than Tyrone Taylor is. I think this team gets some, especially on outfield defense.
Yeah, so ultimately, when you really look at it closely, both were pretty much elite pitching staffs. And last year, that was a lot easier to understand when you have Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Devin Williams at the top, sort of leading things. That was pretty easy to understand why. Like, it's not particularly shocking when you find out that the Brewers led baseball in run prevention last year, especially with the good defense. This year it is shocking. Like, this has taken everybody by surprise. And maybe those of us hardcore fans who know should have said, well, they're probably going to be better than we think just because that's what they do. It's like their core competency. It's what they're best at. But we didn't see it coming. I didn't see this coming. This is absolutely insane. This
not
is
top 3, top 5.
No. That would have been crazy talk coming into the season. And the fact that then they did it, even though a bunch of things that they had planned for this year, like Wade Miley, they had nothing from Wade Miley. DL Hall was hurt almost the entire year. They got basically, almost nothing until these last few weeks from him. And what they got was bad. So they just completely flabbergasting from the perspective of what they're doing this year. And are we going to remember this going into next year and let it guide our thought process?
Absolutely not. No.
I don't have a lot of faith that I'm going to. Like, I think I'm going to fall into make the same mistake I did. And so maybe this is our reminder. We need to, they're setting a reminder right now. Like, don't underestimate the Brewers' ability to, just scrape pitching out of seemingly nothing, because they just seem to do it on repeat just about every year at this point.
All right, wrapping things up this week, our last Patreon question comes from Devin Bearwolf asking this week, so all the national media outlets have been pushing Jackson Merrill as having a better rookie season than Jackson Chourio. But I look at the numbers and I feel like they're pretty close. What does Chourio have to do to take the lead over Merrill and Skeens to win the Rookie of the Year? So as we do this right now, Merrill is the top performing rookie in terms of Fangraphs WAR at 4.5. Jackson Chourio second in the National League at 3.3. And it's worth mentioning, though, that Paul Skeens also has 3.3 Fangraphs WAR as a pitcher in just 19 starts. So it's really been that big three. I know we've talked about Paul Skeens' star factor and just the national attention that he gets as a major factor in this voting, especially in a ballot where you only get 3 spots, right? So I guess for me, it's just that, Jackson Chourio's slow start to the season is really what's going to probably cost him here. Jackson Merrill was dynamite from the start of the year. He's 21, so he's not even that much older than Jackson Chourio, and he's playing out of position essentially, right, Ryan? He came up as a middle infielder. They shoved him into center field and said, "Here you go, kid," and he's been excellent there too. So I guess, Ryan, is there anything Jackson Chourio can do over these last few weeks to catch up, or do we kind of need to have Jackson Merrill cool off significantly?
Yeah, I think Merrill's going to have to cool off, and Trio was going to have to go on an absolute all-time run in terms of bashing baseballs. I still don't think that's probably going to work, and frankly, I would like Churio to finish behind Skeens in this, because I don't care who wins Rookie of the Year, and I don't think Churio is going to win it. If he's going to win it, that's fine. I do really want Skeens to make sure he finishes. I think he has to finish top 2. Maybe it's top 3.
Top 2. Yep, top 2.
He has to finish top 2, and then he picks up a full year of service time, and that punishes the Pirates for having service time manipulated him. And they don't get the PPI. They won't get the prospect incentive pick, but they will lose the year of service time on him. And that is really what they so richly deserve in this case. And frankly, I would definitely be way rooting for the Brewers to do this if we could pick up the PPI. But because of baseball's, as Paul has pointed out many times here, they're farcically bad rules on this. We don't stand to gain a lot, do we?
Nope. So, yeah, he'd have to be like Barry Bonds for a month, and not going to happen. Jackson Merrill's good. That's just not going to happen. Skeens is still going to win it, I think, just on fame, but doesn't matter. We got nothing to gain here. We can sit back and in the shadows and just have the best player going forward, and that's fine.
Yeah, because that really is kind of what that feels like. Though Merrill is, I think both of these guys are going to be pretty good though with Skeens.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
You do worry about the injury because he's a pitcher and because he's throwing 102 or whatever he's throwing out there. Like as a starter, those guys don't have the greatest health track record. But then again, we'll see. I don't know. He's definitely going to be a pain in the butt in the division for a while because he absolutely clowned the Brewers at least once this year. I don't know. Did he do it more than once? I remember watching the game where he clowned him once. So, and I think hit them for 7 innings before they yanked him. So, yeah.
All right. That was almost no hitter. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Either one of those two, Merrill or Skeens, definitely going to win.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's fine. Like you guys said, we have Jackson Churio locked up for 10 years, and both of those other guys are probably leaving in free agency. So take that. All right. That'll do it for Patreon questions this week. Again, patreon.com/MKE tailgate, $2 a month gets you that question priority both here and on reporting as eligible. We also give a shout out to patrons when they sign up. And Ryan, who do we have listed here?
So I don't normally mention when people join on a free, but I have to in this case because Paul Noonan, for some reason, joined on a free this week, and I desperately want to hear the story about this. So how is it that you ended up...
It's boring, but I'll tell you. Here's the story.
I want to hear it.
When I ask for reporting as eligible Patreon questions, I have to get and copy those into the rundown by going to Patreon and accessing it. And Patreon is annoying in requiring 2-factor authentication, and Ryan has the phone for the 2-factor authentication. So sometimes I'm at work and I get logged out of Patreon on my work computer and I can't get in. And so I was like, oh, maybe if I do a free thing, I can't interact with the site, but maybe I can see the questions. I cannot. That does not work. So tried it, didn't work, and that is how I ended up signing up for free.
Wait, shouldn't you be able to? I think if you make the questions, but you can't make the questions open. Yeah, that's a problem. Okay, because I do that for the baseball one because it's not as big a concern, but you can't for the football one. Oh, that sucks. Okay,
it's a pretty minor concern. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. The 2-factor thing, because those do come at the weirdest, randomest times too. Usually, like 9:30 in the morning or something. It seems to be the favored time to get those.
Yep.
I suppose
when you're in Europe. Yeah,
you said when you're at work. So, there was one when I was in Europe, and that was a little difficult because I think it was like 3 a.m. where I was. So sorry about that. But
I think that was my fault. Yeah.
Oh, was that yours? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anyways, but yes, we don't normally mention free, but in that case, I was, my curiosity was killing me. So I think I'm also a free member of the thing as well. I think I did that at some point for some reason. I'm not sure why. I wasn't going to pay for my own podcast, but You did for a while, Paul, but that was before you became a full-time host.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Again, patreon.com/MKE tailgate, $2 a month, question priority, $5. You get the extra podcasts. The reporting as eligible mini pods come out on Fridays. Paul does them extremely well. Definitely worth that $5 just alone. But then you also get the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer. So be on the lookout for those as well. That'll do it for this week. The Brewers, as we mentioned, headed out west over the next few days. 3 games in San Francisco before a very important and tough 10-game stretch where we go Diamondbacks, Phillies, Diamondbacks. So could be some playoff seeding implications there as well. We'll track how things start over that stretch next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you then.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the zip code has changed. I might smile and joy when I'm currently employed. Your soul can't be rearranged. It's hard to understand, so hard to understand. Fair weather, fair